Hello, I'm Khadijah Washington, Assistant Director in the Office of Accessibility, Resources, and Services at UNC Greensboro.
And I'm Sharon Page. I'm an Assistant Director and Testing Coordinator for the Office of Accessibility, Resources, and Services at UNCG. And we're here today to talk about equal access in student affairs through universal design.
So let's take a look at our objectives for today. Today, we want to learn what universal design is and how to implement universal design within your department, kind of specifically looking at student affairs and student service departments. So what is universal design? Universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. So that's really saying that universal design is a design to implement the use of spaces, the use of services to people without having to make accommodations or having to bring in adaptive technology. It's truly what it says. We want to think about universal, think about all people, no matter the disability or ability, or no matter what the need is. So universal design for learning, or UDL as we call it, is a set of principles for curriculum development that gives all individuals equal opportunities to learn. UDL provides a blueprint for creating instructional goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone, not a single one-size-fits-all solution, but rather a flexible approach that can be customized and adjusted for individual needs. Again, we think about universal design a lot in the classroom, but today we're going to talk a lot and give examples about utilizing universal design throughout the university community through student services and student affairs. So a little bit of legal history about universal design. The Assistive Technology Act, as amended in 2004, defines universal design, or UD, as the term universal design means a concept or philosophy for designing and delivering products and services that are usable by people with the widest possible range of functional capabilities, which include products and services that are directly accessible without requiring assistive technologies, and products and services that are operable with assistive technologies. So again, we really are looking at the universal aspect for all people.
Statistic. Approximately 19.4% of undergraduate students and 11.9% of graduate students identify as a student with a disability. We know that's probably a low number because many students do not identify as a student with a disability in college. They'd rather try it without receiving accommodations. 73% of students with disabilities are enrolling in higher education straight out of high school, either at a community college, a technical college, or a four-year university. Now, when we look at these statistics, we know for a fact after with COVID, we're seeing a majority of our students increase in the graduate level, which means that more students are coming back after probably being laid off or hours being cut for jobs, and they're trying to find a better job in which they come to the university to learn that skill. So today we're going to talk about the 7 principles of universal design, which was coined by the late Ronald Mace from North Carolina State University. He was an architect who saw that as people were getting older, they weren't able to stay in their homes because of the way the home was designed. So he decided that he would coin this phrase and come up with these ways to make it easier to stay in the home. But then it went into education and into universal design. So the 7 principles are equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, size and space for approach and use. We're going to talk about each one of these and give examples of how it can be used universally in student affairs. Our first one is equitable use. This design is very useful to people with diverse abilities. It provides the same means for use for all students, identical when possible, equivalent when not. Avoid singling out any one. It should be appealing for all students. So if we think about this, the Recreation Wellness website is designed so that it's accessible to everyone, including people who are blind. All electronic material is readable by a screen reader. Think about it. If you have a PDF, you need to make sure you have a Word document in which Microsoft Word is accessible to screen readers. And Microsoft Word is universal to accessibility. Our next one is flexibility in use. This accommodates a wide range of individuals with preferences and abilities. Thinking about, is the person right-handed or left-handed? Adjustable tables in the reception areas so that if you're short in stature or you're large in stature, you can sit under these tables comfortably. Different sizes of chairs. So think about the reception area. Does it have single and oversized chairs in which students who are able to sit comfortably in?
You know, I actually also think about, when I think about student affairs or student service offices, I think about whenever student groups are making plans or programming, you want to make sure that you let these student groups know that you should be able to think about spaces that utilize different types of tables. Maybe you need a table to be adjustable table for a student in a rolling chair, or maybe a student who's tall, who's really awkwardly tall, and may need to adjust the height of the table. Also think about it in departments when you have departmental meetings and you invite different folks. Maybe you should have a wide range of different styles of chairs, different styles of tables. Again, you want to think about universal design outside of the classroom. Think about the university community when you're planning activities, when you're doing different programming on campus.
The next one is simple and intuitive use. The use of design is easy to understand regardless of the student's experience, knowledge, language skills, or current concentration level. We eliminate the unnecessary complexity. Take out all the fluff, get straight to the point. Be consistent with expectations. Use a wide range of literacy and language skills. Information should be consistent in understanding of its importance. Give feedback during and after the task completion. Some things that we can think of, this would be a vending machine that has braille on its buttons and results are vocalized. Also, housing and residence, when the students are understanding their roommates' contracts by going over the rules and expectations, both visually and verbally, so that student can understand.
Another example could be in our leadership office, our civic engagement, especially a time like now when we're upon an election. Instead of only putting out how you vote, maybe through a piece of publication or literature, maybe have someone that is actually giving it a lecture with utilizing some clear language skills, being consistent and making sure that folks understand the importance of what you're explaining. Try to keep it not complex. Be as clear and concise as possible.
Perceptual information. This communicates necessary information effectively to the student, regardless of the ambient conditions or the student's sensory abilities. So one, use of different modes, pictures for the visual, verbal, being able to hear, tactile, being able to feel, to present essential information. Differentiate information in ways that can be described, i.e. make it easy to give instructions. Make a list, 1, 2, 3, 4. Provide a variety of techniques or devices used by people with sensory limitations. So videos include captioning or transcript of audio. So just like if the career services, they're showing videos of how to do an interview. with the techniques from the interview should be captioned, and then provide an audio transcript to provide the necessary things if the student is of hearing. Our next one is tolerance for error. The design minimizes hazards and adverse consequences for accidental or unintended actions. It provides warnings of errors. It provides fail-safe features. It discourages unconscious action and takes that required diligence. So for us and for many of our partners in student affairs, you now have to sign in on an iPad to get into Maxient, which alerts us that a person's here to see us. That software allows students to make mistakes without having to start over from the beginning. Let's say that they put in their ID number wrong. They don't have to go back and put in their name and date and what they're being seen for. They can just put in the ID number again. Low physical effort. The design can be used efficiently and comfortably within a minimum of fatigue. It allows the student to maintain a neutral body position, uses reasonable operating forces, minimizes repetitive actions, minimize sustained physical effort. So doors are opening automatically. A low amount of effort should be required in order to maximize their attention to learning, which cuts down on transitions. Also, we think about the counseling center. If they're offering group sessions, they make sure that students can move about the activity and does not require repetitive actions for like taking notes. You know, a student can take notes, but also allow them to record so that they can go back and put down what they missed. Our last one is size and space for approach and use. This provides appropriate size and space for approach, reach, and manipulation in the use regardless of the student's body size, posture, or mobility. Provide a clear line of sight in order to see important elements for anyone seated or standing user. So wherever you stand, you make sure everyone has a good line of sight for them. You make sure all components are for seated or reaching the student can reach. So if you have index cards, you put them where they can easily reach and they don't have to be asking for others to hand it to them or they have to reach over. Provide adequate space for the use of assistive devices or personal assistants. So the door, for example, the door is accessible for the wheelchair to go through. The room for the wheelchairs, personal care assistants, and sign language interpreters are easy to navigate. You have a large area that's large enough to support a CCTV, a portable CCTV. And you also make sure that the person doesn't feel awkward standing or sitting, whatever their preference is.
You know, Shay, with this one, I also think about maybe your student union. For instance, ours is the Elliott University Center. I think about the spaces in there whenever they're planning to set up a study space for students, or maybe a lounge area space for students, especially because we've had to rearrange due to COVID and things like that. I think offices like that have to keep in mind, maybe you have several seating options of different kinds or styles of chairs. Sometimes we want to be unified and look the same, but take into consideration that you may need a chair for a person of larger stature. Maybe one chair has arms and maybe the next chair doesn't have arms. I think about a department like facilities, for instance. Facilities is not exactly a student-facing office, but in our university, it is under student affairs. And I think about the persons who work there. Maybe you want to make sure that the seating or standing areas are appropriate for those folks. So whenever you're planning any programming, whenever you're setting up for a meeting, if you're providing spaces for students to study, you want to make sure that you're thinking universally, thinking about all kinds of people, maybe tall people or shorter people. You want to take all of those into consideration so that you're approaching it in a universal manner.
And that leads into good communication. We need to be familiar with available assistive technology that we have on campus, and to be able to make sure we document our documents in alternative formats for us. We need to make sure we know how to respond to requests for disability-related accommodations. So anybody doing a program needs to make sure that they have put down, if you need accommodations, to let them know in advance so they can plan for this. Also, when you're speaking with students who have a hearing impairment or hard of hearing or deaf, make sure that you're speaking directly to that student and not to a sign language interpreter or a personal assistant, because you're not carrying on a conversation with them. You're carrying on the conversation with that person in front of you. So make sure that you're speaking directly to that person, because attitude is your best communication.
And communication is key. You could have planned a program, maybe you're in campus activities and you've planned a program that is geared toward, I don't know, maybe you're talking about your sorority and fraternity life, and you've thought out of the box, you've thought universally, but you still have to remember folks may request an accommodation. So you need to be prepared and ready prior to the event. Make that a part of your planning. What happens if a student requests a certain accommodation? Maybe you reach out to an office like ORS or a disability office to seek some guidance. I often think too about events that go on campus, like commencement. It's a pretty large event. So you want to make sure that that event, it takes a long time to plan and prepare for. So if you make sure that folks know how to request accommodations on the front end, you're going to be ready and ready to meet things head on. And like Shay said, you want to make sure that you're aware of issues related to communicating with all kinds of students. You want to make sure you let your speakers know, hey, maybe still continue to speak to the audience. You don't have to directly speak to the interpreter. Communication is kind of the leading thing when you think universally, because you're going to want to communicate with all different areas. If you're putting a program together and you're looking for a space, you want to communicate with the people over the spaces, the facilities people, the people who make who set the times and the reservations for that. You want to communicate with students who don't have disabilities. Maybe you just want to communicate with students if you know you're having a program in athletics and you're inviting the basketball team. We know that they're usually taller statures, so you want to make sure that you're speaking with them to find out what's going to be comfortable for them to use as well. Attitude is definitely the best communication. Having a good attitude. So let's talk about department a little bit. Again, we know about universal design in the classroom, but we really want to step outside that box and think about universal design across the campus and the community, the university community. Items to think about having in your department, which it may not be feasible to have everything, but it's really nice when you have some of those things. And those items could be anything from adjustable workstations or tables for those who use moving chairs, or maybe are shorter in stature, or maybe they're taller. You want to make sure you have those stations available in your office. Maybe you don't have every single station is an adjustable station, but you want to have an option just in case you have a person come in and work, or maybe volunteer, or maybe just coming into your department to visit or ask a question.
And remember, what we're saying is very easy on the wallet. It's not something that you've got to go and spend a lot of money on.
Try to maybe have large print key labels for students with low vision. This could be on the keyboard. You can maybe have a large print keyboard, maybe just as an option if you're set up in a computer lab, or if maybe you're in career services where students come in and utilize the computers. You want to maybe have some software to enlarge screen images for students with low vision or learning disability. You may even want to have just a large magnifying glass. If you work in housing and residence life, and maybe you just have a person who needs to read over or review their contract, and maybe they need it enlarged, and you don't have a piece of software or a piece of equipment to enlarge that. Pull out that microscope and get a rather large one and go through it with them. Maybe have trackballs for people with mobility issues at computer stations. Again, a lot of times in housing and residence life, they've got designated computer areas. maybe have some of these things there just in case a student may need to utilize it. Printed material, make sure that printed material is accessible to reach from racks on the walls. This could simply require you to maybe lower your racks down. With COVID-19 right now, we've been lucky. We're doing a lot of things virtual, but when you think about that, you want to make sure if you're posting on your social media that maybe you're making sure that you have the alt text there. So if it's a flyer with a picture on it, it's got some descriptives there. If you're maybe having a virtual meetup for counseling, maybe you're doing a virtual counseling group, maybe you just want to have a interpreter there, have it captioned, or a transcript of the audio. You want to think about those things prior to the event. You want to think about it even if you don't get that accommodation request. It may be somebody who decided last minute that they wanted to come to this activity that Campus Activities is putting on. So if you are thinking with universal design in mind, you're kind of crossing off those T's and dotting those I's prior to. If nobody is there that needs an accommodation, you've still done a due diligence to have it available just in case. Think about, again, text alternatives for every visual piece of material for blind students. Maybe you can have a closed circuit TV, CCTV, or a large magnifying glass available to enlarge print. Or maybe you can go over, if you know you've got a request that has come in for large print or CCTV, go over to your disability or accessibility office and ask them if they have anything you can use. Have publications available in alternative formats such as Braille, large text, audio, or electronic text. Again, maybe you're working in campus enterprises in that unit and you've got a flyer going out about mailing services, especially during COVID. Maybe you should put that in an audio format and send it out to students. You should try to include a statement in key publications explaining the procedures for requesting disability-related accommodations. You know, as Shay said before, universal design is not going to cancel out the need for accommodations in our services in accessibility or disability. But you're going to have folks who need those disability-related accommodations. And so you want to make sure that they know that those are still an option. Okay, and even when you include that statement, you must know what happens when you get that accommodation request, okay?
Which carries over now into events. So when you're holding an event, you need to think about the space and the use of the moving chair. Can they sit in the front? Can they sit in the middle? Can they sit at the back of the room? Have a map of where the elevators are in the building, location of restrooms, so students know where to go. They don't have to ask during the event. They know already where it's at. Also, when you're doing an event, make sure when you put out the promotional materials, you have included a statement how to request accommodations, because that sometimes takes a little bit of time to get an interpreter at night to come and do a program. Or it might be that it takes more than an hour to get a publication in a Word document, or to have the event recorded. So make sure that when you're doing an event, you plan in advance. That's the key. Plan in advance for the possibility of having a student ask for an accommodation.
And you know, when I think about events, especially in this COVID-19 era, North Carolina is moving into the next phase, and which is going to enlarge the opportunity for more folks to be in a space. Maybe you're going to plan an event outside. Keep in mind, thinking universally when you plan different things. For example, we have an event here. We usually do prior to COVID, we have a carnival style event. Think about those students who may be in rolling chairs. On the grass, maybe have an alternative area or space to have those so that they're not sinking down. Maybe think about your event in the aspects of what you're providing at this event. Think about ways to include things in games maybe, or programming that everybody can enjoy and be included. And again, like Shay was saying, you definitely want to make sure that any materials, promotional materials, definitely include that request, because sometimes getting the accommodation met takes a little bit of time and a little bit of work. When you're thinking about events, try to think universal. Think about that left-handed person who may not be able to sit at that right-handed style desk. Think about the shorter stature person who may need a different kind of seat or table. You want to really plan ahead as much as possible, thinking universal design. Remember, universal design is just not in the classroom. We want to bring universal design to the whole university community, especially in events, because we want all of our students to be able to participate in the events. So some more things to think about. Plan your facilities and services using the principles of universal design. Think about all 7 that we've talked about today. So when you're getting ready after spring semester in the summer, we do a lot of planning. When you're planning these events, planning different programming, planning meetings, anything that you're looking to do, plan your facilities and services using these principles in mind, keeping those in mind. This means designing for a broad range of potential users. Try to think about any and everybody. Again, from the left-handed person to the person in the rolling chair to a person who's hard of hearing or deaf, including those with disabilities. Everyone should be able to access the same material that everybody else is in the same manner that everybody else does without causing an undue commotion to themselves or making a spectacle of themselves. We all want to be comfortable.
So something to take away from universal design. For one, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. It promotes best practices, but it doesn't lower the standards. We're just given an equal playing field. It's being proactive and implement these in stages. We don't have to go out and make your entire department universally designed. You don't have to do that. You can do it in stages. And it can be done very cheaply sometimes too. Benefits everyone and minimizes the need for accommodations. Just like Khadijah said, we're not taking away the Disability Services Office by no means. We're just taking away some of the things that maybe can be done by the person in that department, and they wouldn't have to come and ask for our help. Promotes compatibility with assistive technology, making sure you have the technology available for those who are visually impaired, deaf, hard of hearing, or has learning disabilities. And where to find this information? We've listed several websites that you can go to for universal design that we've used for this presentation. And we've also given out the information that we have on our website. Like we said before, universal design is for everyone, not just for the person with a disability. It can be easy to fix if you look and see what's available on your university. Always check with your disability office because they always have good information for you. And thank you for coming. We hope you've learned something today from the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. Go Spartans!
Go Spartans. Thank you again for sharing this short time with us, and we do appreciate it. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer them.